You didn't come this far to feel empty again. But here you are, exhausted by your own awakening. You mastered the words, lit the candles, performed the rituals with precision. You can speak the language of transformation fluently. Chakras, shadow work, manifestation, integration. Yet somewhere along this path of healing, you forgot how to rest. You forgot how to simply be without the constant effort of becoming. This isn't failure, it's initiation. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of its deepest chapter. Today, we'll descend into the hidden burnout behind your healing journey, explore the secret exhaustion that no one talks about, and discover how sometimes the most profound healing happens when we stop trying to heal. Are you ready to meet yourself beneath the spiritual performance? Let's begin. There's a sacred myth whispered among seekers, passed down through wellness communities, spiritual circles, and self-help forums, that once you begin healing, the path only ascends. That once you commit to your growth, you'll climb steadily toward enlightenment, each practice building upon the last, each breakthrough leading to the next. You believed this myth because it made sense. You read the books, hundreds of them. You learned to chant the mantras with perfect pronunciation. You journaled every emotion, tracked every pattern, analyzed every trigger like a forensic scientist of the soul. You collected crystals, attended workshops, hired coaches, joined communities. You became fluent in the language of transformation, speaking of vibrations and alignments, of shadow work and inner child healing. And for a while, it worked beautifully. You glowed with the radiance of someone who had found their path. You grew in ways that amazed your friends and family. You became the go-to person for wisdom, the one people turned to when they needed guidance. You embodied transformation, lived and breathed personal development. But slowly, imperceptibly, like a shadow creeping across the landscape at dusk, a weight began to settle in. The practices that once felt like coming home started to feel like obligations. The rituals that once filled you with wonder became routine tasks to check off your spiritual to-do list. Every shadow you attempted to integrate left you more depleted than before, as if you were mining your own soul for material to heal. You became a full-time curator of your own wounds, spending more time analyzing your pain than actually living your life. The healing that once felt like liberation transformed into something else entirely, performative, obsessive, exhausting. What was once soul work became soul strain, and the journey that promised freedom became another form of imprisonment. And here's the part no one talks about, the secret that healing communities don't address, the hidden burnout of healing itself. When the very quest to fix yourself becomes the mask you wear to hide from your own humanity. When your spiritual practice becomes spiritual bypassing. When your healing journey becomes a sophisticated form of self-rejection. But this isn't where your story ends. It's where it finally breathes. This collapse isn't evidence of your failure. It's an invitation to awaken to something deeper, not to do more, but to undo, not to ascend higher, but to descend into the sacred pause where real transformation lives. Not to become better, but to remember that you were never broken in the first place. Let's begin this descent together. The spiral calls, and it's time to answer. You ask this question in the quiet moments between practices when no one is watching and the spiritual mask slips. It emerges in the space between your morning meditation and your gratitude journaling, in the pause between your affirmations and your intention setting. If I've done all this work, why am I still so tired? It's a question that carries the weight of countless hours spent in healing, thousands of dollars invested in growth, years dedicated to becoming a better version of yourself. It echoes through the chambers of your heart with a particular kind of exhaustion. Not the tired that comes from physical exertion, but the bone-deep weariness of a soul that has been working overtime. This isn't a casual question. It's a sacred inquiry, born from the honest recognition that something isn't adding up. The math of your healing doesn't make sense. All the input should have yielded different output. All the effort should have produced more peace, more joy, more of that elusive sense of having it all together. But here's what I want you to understand. This fatigue isn't laziness, and it isn't spiritual weakness. It's not evidence that you're doing something wrong or that you're somehow fundamentally flawed. This is soul exhaustion from over-efforting your healing. Burnout dressed in enlightened clothes. The natural consequence of treating your inner life like a project to be completed. You've become a master of processes. You know exactly which essential oil to use for which emotion, which meditation technique works best for anxiety, which journaling prompt will unlock which insights. You can speak fluently about nervous system regulation, attachment styles, and trauma responses. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that the point was never mastery. It was presence. You forgot that healing isn't a skill to be perfected, but a relationship to be nurtured. You forgot that the goal wasn't to become someone who never struggles, but to become someone who can be present with their struggle. Your relationship with healing became transactional. You gave it your energy, your time, your devotion, your money, expecting transformation in return. You approached your soul like a broken machine that needed fixing, your emotions like problems to be solved, your humanity like a rough draft to be edited into perfection. But the soul doesn't work like a vending machine. It doesn't dispense peace in exchange for perfect practice. It doesn't respond to force or demand or urgent timelines. The soul works in seasons, in cycles, in rhythms that can't be rushed or controlled. Listen closely, because somewhere deep within, your soul has been whispering something important. It doesn't want another method. It wants mercy. Your soul isn't asking for more techniques, more tools, more ways to improve. It's asking for gentleness, for patience, for the radical act of being loved exactly as you are right now, without needing to change or grow or become anything different. You don't need more rituals. You need rest. Not the rest that comes after accomplishment, but the rest that comes from finally laying down the burden of trying to become someone other than who you are. Not the rest earned through productivity, but the rest that is your birthright simply because you exist. Let's be brutally honest about something that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. Much of modern healing isn't healing at all. It's an obsession with self-improvement wrapped in sacred language, personal development disguised as spiritual practice, the achievement orientation of capitalism applied to the soul. We've turned inner peace into a performance, transformation into a transaction, enlightenment into an achievement to unlock. The healing industry has commodified our pain, packaged our struggles into neat categories, and sold us solutions that promise to fix what was never broken. The checklist becomes our new religion, our daily devotion. Meditate for 20 minutes. Check. Journal 3 pages. Check. Manifest my desires. Check. Reframe negative thoughts. Check. Do shadow work. Check. Practice gratitude. Check. Set intentions. Check. Align with my purpose. Check. Each practice becomes another way to prove our worth, another method to justify our existence, another item to check off in our quest to become good enough. We collect healing modalities like badges of honor, accumulate spiritual insights like trophies, measure our growth like stock market returns. We attend workshops where we learn to break through our patterns, as if our human complexity could be shattered in a weekend. We hire coaches who promise to help us quantum leap past our limitations, as if growth were a competition to be won rather than a relationship to be nurtured. We invest in programs that guarantee to unlock our potential, as if we were safes to be cracked rather than beings to be loved. And underneath it all, beneath the affirmations and visualizations and energy clearings, we still ache. We still wake up some mornings feeling empty. We still get triggered by the same things that triggered us years ago. We still fear not being enough, not having enough, not doing enough. We still seek wholeness like it's somewhere else, something we can achieve if we just try hard enough, practice long enough, pay enough.
But here's what the healing industry doesn't want you to know. This approach to healing is often spiritual bypassing dressed up as authentic work. It's the idea that we can think our way out of feeling, that we can transcend our humanity rather than embrace it, that we can heal our way out of being human. We've been sold the lie that healing means never being triggered again, never feeling sad or angry or confused. We've been told that if we do the work correctly, we'll achieve some state of permanent peace, constant joy, unshakable confidence. We've been convinced that our natural human emotions are problems to be solved, rather than information to be received. This isn't your fault. This path was sold as a ladder, linear, progressive, with clear milestones and measurable outcomes. Do this, get that. Complete this level, unlock the next. Heal this wound, access this gift. But true healing isn't linear, and it definitely isn't a ladder. True healing is a spiral, and spirals descend before they rise. They circle back to what was always there, waiting to be remembered. They don't follow straight lines or predictable patterns. They honor the seasons of the soul, times of expansion and times of contraction, times of knowing and times of not knowing, times of clarity and beautiful confusion. You didn't fail because you collapsed. You finally paused long enough to listen to what your soul was actually saying beneath all the noise of improvement. You finally allowed yourself to feel the exhaustion that comes from trying to perfect something that was never meant to be perfected. The collapse isn't a sign that you're not spiritual enough or that you haven't done enough work. It's a sign that you've been working so hard to become someone else that you forgot to be who you are. It's your soul's way of saying, stop trying to fix me and start loving me. Somewhere deep in the spiral of your healing journey, something shifted. Maybe it happened gradually, like the slow turning of seasons, or maybe it hit you all at once like a thunderbolt of recognition. But somewhere along the way, you stopped striving. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was grace, maybe it was both. Maybe you simply couldn't take another step on the endless treadmill of self-improvement. In that moment of surrender, not defeat, but genuine letting go, something strange and beautiful happened. You felt yourself again. Not the version of you that was trying to fix everything, not the one trying to attract more abundance or ascend faster, or the perfect practitioner or the enlightened being you thought you needed to become. Just you, breathing, existing, being exactly where you are. This pause isn't comfortable at first. We've been conditioned to equate stillness with stagnation, rest with laziness, not doing with not growing. We've been taught that if we're not moving forward, we're falling behind. If we're not improving, we're feeling. If we're not becoming, we're just being. And somehow just being doesn't feel like enough. But here's the radical truth that no workshop can teach you, no book can explain, no guru can give you. In that sacred pause, you discover that you were never broken. You were just tired of pretending you weren't tired. You were just exhausted from the effort of trying to be anything other than exactly who you are. The soul doesn't want constant growth. It wants rhythm. It wants the natural ebb and flow of expansion and contraction, the breathing in and breathing out of life itself. It wants reverence for all the seasons of human experience, the light and the dark, the knowing and the unknowing, the put together and the falling apart. In nature, nothing grows constantly. Trees have seasons of budding, blooming, bearing fruit, and going dormant. Even the most vibrant garden has times of rest, times when the soil lies fallow and gathers nutrients for the next season of growth. Yet somehow we've convinced ourselves that we should be in perpetual spring, always blooming, always producing, always becoming. Real healing isn't about always moving forward. It's about remembering who's taking the journey. It's about recognizing that the one seeking wholeness is already whole, has always been whole, even in the seeking. It's about understanding that the search for yourself is happening within yourself, conducted by yourself, for yourself. In the pause, you begin to notice things you missed while you were busy improving. You notice the way light moves across your wall in the afternoon. You notice the sound of your own breathing, the feeling of your feet on the ground. the simple miracle of being alive in a body on this earth. You notice that peace isn't something you achieve, it's something you remember. Joy isn't something you attract, it's something you uncover. Love isn't something you earn, it's something you are. The pause isn't a failure of your spiritual practice, it's the point of it. In the silence between the doing, you discover the being. In the space between the healing and the healed, you find what was never wounded. In the gap between who you think you should be and who you actually are, you encounter the love that has been waiting there all along. This awareness doesn't come with fanfare or dramatic revelation. It arrives quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. It's the soft recognition that you've been looking everywhere for what was always here. It's the gentle understanding that you've been trying to become what you already are.
Now we come to perhaps the most challenging part of this journey, recognizing how our healing identity can become another cage. This is uncomfortable territory because it requires us to examine not just our wounds, but our attachment to being wounded, not just our problems, but our investment in having problems to solve. Sometimes the identity of healer or spiritual seeker or person doing the work becomes the new prison. It feels safer than the messy reality of being human because it gives us a role, a purpose, a way to be valuable in the world. It provides meaning and structure and a sense of forward movement. It makes us special, different, more conscious than those who aren't doing the work. You become the mindful one in your family, the one who always has insight into what's really going on beneath the surface. You become the friend who holds space for everyone else's emotions, who never reacts unconsciously, who always responds with wisdom and compassion. You become the person who never spirals, never loses it, never allows themselves to be fully human, because that would compromise your spiritual reputation. This identity feels like evolution, but it's often just another form of hiding. You've traded one mask for another. This one happens to be made of spiritual concepts and healing modalities instead of conventional success markers, but it's still a mask. You're still performing, still trying to be worthy of love, still believing that your value comes from what you do, rather than who you are. The healing identity can become addictive because it provides a sense of progress, purpose, and superiority. There's always another layer to peel back, another wound to heal, another pattern to break. There's always a new modality to try, a new teacher to follow, a new level of consciousness to achieve. It keeps us busy, keeps us feeling productive, keeps us focused on becoming rather than being. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to disappear behind this identity. You forget how to scream authentically, because spiritual people don't lose control. You forget how to say, "I don't know," without immediately reaching for a spiritual concept to fill the void. You forget how to be confused, to be ordinary, to be imperfect without making it into a teaching moment. Your forgetting is sacred. Your struggle is sacred. Your tendency to fall apart is sacred. Your humanity, all of it, not just the parts that have been healed or processed or integrated, is worthy of love. The most radical act of healing might be admitting that you don't need to be healed, that the parts of you that are struggling, the parts that are messy and imperfect and deeply human, deserve love, not because they're getting better, but because they're here. That your worth isn't determined by your level of consciousness, or your ability to maintain equanimity, or your skill at managing your emotions. This doesn't mean abandoning your practices, or your growth, or your genuine desire to evolve. It means holding them lightly, engaging with them from love, rather than from the desperate need to be different than you are. It means recognizing that you are both the seeker and the sought, the healer and the healed, the student and the teacher. So let this be your liberation. You don't have to earn your worth through awareness. You don't have to justify your existence through growth. You don't have to fix your shadow to be lovable or transcend your humanity to be worthy of compassion. You don't have to be the most conscious person in the room, or the most healed person in your family, or the most evolved soul in your community.
you can rest now. Not because you finished healing, there is no finish line, but because healing was never a destination, it was always an invitation to return home to yourself, to soften into your own embrace, to remember that you are the love you've been seeking. You can be ordinary, you can be imperfect, you can be human, and that can be enough. That is enough. That has always been enough.
So how do we heal without striving? How do we grow without grasping? How do we transform without forcing? How do we practice without performing? These questions matter because they point toward a different way of being with ourselves, a different relationship with our own becoming. We begin again, but this time from a different place, not from the mind that wants to control the process, analyze the outcomes, and measure the progress, but from the body that knows how to breathe without being taught. Not from the will that wants to improve, achieve, and overcome, but from the heart that knows how to love what is, exactly as it is. This isn't about abandoning practices or spiritual disciplines. It's about approaching them from a place of curiosity rather than desperation, from love rather than lack, from fullness rather than emptiness. It's about doing your practices because you want to commune with yourself, not because you need to fix yourself. We let healing become less about change and more about connection, less about controlling the future and more about being present with what's actually here, less about fixing what's wrong and more about loving what's real, less about becoming someone else and more about befriending who you are. Maybe today your healing looks like taking a nap instead of meditating because your body is asking for rest, not more discipline. Maybe it's canceling the ritual and crying in your car because your emotions need expression, not management. Maybe it's eating something that brings you joy instead of something that's good for you because your soul is hungry for pleasure, not perfection. Maybe your healing is letting the mask fall, even the spiritual one, especially the spiritual one. Maybe it's admitting you don't have it all figured out, and that's not just okay, it's beautiful. Maybe it's allowing yourself to be ordinary, to be human, to be imperfect without making it a project to fix. You don't need to glow every day. You don't need to be on all the time. You don't need to perform peace or demonstrate enlightenment or prove your spiritual advancement to anyone, including yourself. Your worth isn't determined by your vibration or your manifestation abilities or your capacity to stay positive in the face of difficulty. Your wholeness was never in how light you appeared to others. It's in how real you allow yourself to be, how present you can be with your own experience, how tenderly you can hold all the parts of yourself that are still figuring it out. This kind of healing happens in the small moments, the unglamorous spaces, the ordinary experiences that we usually overlook in our search for peak experiences and breakthrough moments. It happens when you're kind to yourself on a difficult day. It happens when you let yourself feel sad without trying to fix it. It happens when you meet your anxiety with curiosity instead of resistance. It happens when you stop trying to be a good spiritual person and start being a real human being. When you stop trying to transcend your humanity and start embracing it. When you stop trying to rise above your emotions and start moving through them with grace and compassion. The deepest healing happens not in the doing, but in the being, not in the becoming, but in the accepting, not in the transcending, but in the embracing, not in the fixing, but in the loving, not in the perfect, but in the present. This isn't passive acceptance or spiritual bypassing or giving up on growth. This is the active choice to love yourself into wholeness rather than fixing yourself into perfection. This is the revolutionary act of treating yourself as if you are already worthy of love, already deserving of compassion, already enough, exactly as you are. And here, beneath the burnout, beneath the striving, beneath the endless effort to become someone else, you discover the quiet you've longed for all along, the peace that doesn't depend on your performance, the love that doesn't require your perfection, the wholeness that was never missing, never broken, never lost. Welcome back to yourself. You were never lost, only tired of looking everywhere else for what was always here. You were never broken, only tired of trying to fix what was never broken.
You were never not enough, only tired of trying to prove that you were.
Now comes the delicate work of integration. Not the integration of shadow material or suppressed emotions, but the integration of this new understanding into your daily life. How do you live from this place of enoughness while still honoring your genuine desire to grow? How do you hold space for both being and becoming? How do you navigate the paradox of accepting yourself completely while remaining open to transformation? This is where most people get stuck. They swing from one extreme to another, from obsessive self-improvement to complete stagnation, from spiritual striving to spiritual bypassing, from trying too hard to not trying at all. But the invitation here is to find the middle way, the place where effort and ease dance together. You learn to practice because you love to practice, not because you need to achieve a particular state. You meditate because sitting in silence feels good, not because you're trying to achieve a particular state. You journal because you enjoy the conversation with yourself, not because you need to process or heal or figure anything out. You approach your growth like a gardener rather than a construction worker. Instead of trying to build a new self, you create conditions for natural unfolding. You water the seeds that want to grow. You remove the weeds that block the sun. You trust the seasons of your soul. This means some days you'll feel called to dive deep into practice, to explore your edges, to lean into growth. Other days you'll feel called to rest, to simply be, to do nothing productive at all. Both are sacred. Both are necessary. Both are part of the natural rhythm of a human being who is no longer trying to override their humanity. You learn to hold your practices lightly, like flowers rather than tools. You engage with them from curiosity rather than compulsion. You allow them to evolve and change as you evolve and change. You give yourself permission to outgrow what once served you and to discover new ways of relating to yourself. Most importantly, you learn to distinguish between the voice of your authentic desire to grow and the voice of your conditioned need to improve. One comes from love, the other from fear. One is spacious and patient, the other is urgent and demanding. One trusts the process, the other wants to control the outcome. Learning to distinguish between these voices is perhaps the most important skill you can develop. It's the difference between healing from love and healing from fear, between growing from fullness and growing from emptiness, between becoming who you are and trying to become who you think you should be.
Something beautiful emerging. As you integrate this understanding, something beautiful begins to happen. You start to embody a different way of being in the world. You carry yourself differently, not with the urgency of someone who needs to prove their worth, but with the groundedness of someone who knows their inherent value. You relate to others differently too. Instead of being the one who always has the answer, the insight, the healing modality to recommend, you become someone who can simply be present with whatever is arising. Instead of trying to fix or heal or enlighten everyone around you, you offer the gift of your authentic presence. You stop being threatened by other people's choices to not be on a healing journey. You stop feeling superior to those who aren't doing the work. You stop needing to convert others to your way of seeing or being. You simply live your truth and let others live theirs. Your relationships become more honest, more real, more intimate. You're no longer performing enlightenment or demonstrating your spiritual advancement. You're just being human, which turns out to be far more attractive and connecting than any spiritual persona could ever be. You stop needing to be the most conscious person in the room. You stop competing in the invisible contest of who's more awakened, more healed, more evolved. You stop measuring your spiritual progress against others' journeys. You simply show up as you are and let that be enough. This doesn't mean you become complacent or stop growing. It means you grow from a different place, from self-love rather than self-improvement, from curiosity rather than compulsion, from trust rather than control. Your evolution becomes organic, natural, effortless. You might find that you're drawn to different practices now, or that you practice differently. Maybe you meditate for 5 minutes instead of 20, because that's what feels authentic. Maybe you journal once a week instead of every day, because that's what your soul is asking for. Maybe you take breaks from all practices sometimes, because rest is what you need. You give yourself permission to be a beginner again, to not know, to be confused, to change your mind. You release the pressure to be consistent or perfect or advanced. You allow your journey to be as unique and unpredictable as you are. Most importantly, you learn to trust yourself, not the self that knows all the right spiritual concepts, but the self that knows what you need in each moment. The self that knows when to push and when to rest, when to dive deep and when to stay surface, when to be with others and when to be alone. This trust isn't something you develop through more practices or techniques. It's something you remember, something you uncover, something that was always there, waiting beneath the noise of improvement and the pressure to be different than you are.
If you feel like breaking down right now, if something in you is finally ready to surrender the exhausting effort of trying to perfect yourself, then maybe that's where your real breakthrough begins. Not the breakdown of your life, but the breakdown of the idea that you need to be anything other than exactly who you are in this moment. The breakdown of the belief that you're not enough as you are. The breakdown of the story that your worth depends on your spiritual advancement. The breakdown of the myth that healing means becoming someone else. You don't have to be the perfect seeker, the ideal spiritual practitioner, the one who has it all figured out. You don't have to glow with enlightenment or radiate with good vibes or maintain equanimity in the face of chaos. You don't have to be an inspiration to anyone, including yourself. You just have to be willing to be here, to be real, to be human. You just have to be willing to love yourself as you are, not as you might become. You just have to be willing to rest in your own being without needing to improve it. Breathe. Rest. Let your soul catch up to your seeking. Let your heart catch up to your healing. Let your being catch up to your becoming. Let your humanity catch up to your spirituality. The journey continues. Not through doing more, but through undoing the belief that you need to do more. Not through becoming better, but through accepting that you are already whole. Not through rising above your humanity, but through diving deeper into it. You were never lost. You were only tired of the search. You were never broken. You were only tired of trying to fix what was never broken. You were never not enough. You were only tired of trying to prove that you were. The door to peace was always open. You just forgot you had the key. The love you've been seeking was always here. You just forgot you were the one offering it. The wholeness you've been trying to achieve was always your nature. You just forgot to remember. Let yourself come home. Not to a perfected version of yourself, but to yourself as you are, not to who you might become, but to who you've always been. Not to the self you're trying to create, but to the self that's been here all along, waiting patiently for you to stop trying to improve and start learning to love. Welcome home. You belong here. You always have. You always will. The spiral continues, but now you know you are both the seeker and the destination, the journey and the arrival, the question and the answer. You are enough. You have always been enough. You will always be enough. Rest now. The work is done. The work was never needed. You are exactly where and who you need to be. If your soul exhaled while listening to this, if something in you finally felt permission to rest, subscribe. There's more truth where this came from, more permission to be human, more invitations to come home to yourself.